Hey everyone, how's it going? Well, it's been a hot minute since I have made a video on this channel, as per my last video in which I talked about kind of stepping back from BookTube, but I thought that I would drop down for at least one video because I was tagged in an original tag. This is the Shakespeare Journey Tag. It was created by Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading, and Nicole from A Day of Small Things. It was Jason who tagged me. He asked for permission to tag me beforehand to make sure that I would actually be willing to post a video, since I have been kind of stepping back from BookTube, and I told him to go ahead and tag me, and so he did. And this tag was created as a part of the annual event known as ShakeTember, which is an event in September that celebrates William Shakespeare. And the three hosts posted this tag at the beginning of the month and tagged a bunch of people. And I wanted to get my version of it out before the month ended, so I figured I would post it on the very last day of the month. And this event, of course, is very close to my heart because I was one of the ones who originally created it back in 2017. I created it with Curtis from Curtis Books and Books, who doesn't make videos anymore and who some of you may not even be familiar with because he's been off the radar for a fairly long time. And now I am no longer hosting it as per, again, my stepping back from BookTube. But I wanted to do this tag because Jason tagged me, and I think the questions seem really cool. They're just about your own personal relationship with Shakespeare. So, question 1. What was your first experience reading Shakespeare, and what was it like? Well, like a lot of people who've done this tag, at least a lot of people who've done this tag who are American, my first exposure to Shakespeare was in high school. In my freshman year of high school, we read Romeo and Juliet. And what was it like? I don't have strong memories of having liked or disliked Romeo and Juliet. I can't speak for 15-year-old Lukash and what he thought of it. But I do remember a lot about Romeo and Juliet and how we learned about it from that year. So it must have made a pretty big impression on me. And that would kind of chime with my personality. I have always had a soft spot for Romeo and Juliet because I'm kind of a hopeless romantic at heart, honestly. And I think I was lucky to have a good teacher that year, at least insofar as she taught Romeo and Juliet, because she did a lot to make us really feel what was going on in the play. She would read parts aloud to us in class and kind of explain what people were saying, what was going on, what kind of the motivations between different characters' behavior was. She would also have us actually get up and act out some of the scenes. You know, she had us actually try to inhabit the play a little bit. And then also she had us, of course, watch the film adaptation directed by Franco Zeffirelli, where I distinctly remember thinking that the actor who played Romeo was Zac Efron, and had to be informed that that was not in fact the case. So I think she did a lot to make us really feel the play and did a really good job of kind of telling us what the play was about, what was going on in every scene, and so on and so forth. And that's pretty remarkable that I actually remember that much, because I, again, was not a good student in high school, in that year of high school. So there's a good chance I didn't even read the play in full. But then later in high school, I also was taught Macbeth, which I loved, of course, because I was a teenage boy. And then I also read Othello, which I've never liked as much, but was still kind of cool. So, high school. And I think I had pretty good teachers in terms of how they covered Shakespeare. Okay, number 2. Has the reading of a Shakespeare play ever brought you to tears? What scene was it, and where were you when it happened? The reading of a Shakespeare play has never brought me to tears. It hasn't even made me kind of get misty-eyed or anything. It hasn't even made like the tear ducts sort of get warm behind my eyes. You know how before you cry you feel the sort of tear ducts getting warm behind your eyes, and you know how sometimes when you're reading you can feel the warmth from that well up, but it doesn't quite manifest in tears? even that hasn't happened while reading a Shakespeare play. Of course, there are Shakespeare plays that are extremely moving, like King Lear in particular is just so powerful. But no reading of a Shakespeare play has ever brought me to tears. The closest I think Shakespeare has gotten to making me really tear up is a filmed stage production of Macbeth, which is kind of ironic because I don't think Macbeth tends to come up when people talk about Shakespeare plays that like bring them to tears or that are so profoundly moving. I don't think Macbeth is one of the ones that tends to come up, but I watched this filmed stage production of Macbeth with Ian McKellen as Macbeth, a young Ian McKellen as Macbeth, and Judi Dench as Lady Macbeth. And I will leave a link to this production if I can, because I did watch it on YouTube. And the scene where Macbeth sees the ghost of Banquo, for this man who he had murdered, who used to be his friend, I just found it profoundly moving. Just something about the way that Ian McKellen plays that scene kind of made the character seem so kind of pathetic in his situation that I just felt bad for him, despite the fact that he'd done all these awful things. And that profoundly moved me. I don't know if it quite made me tear up, but it probably did make the tear ducts get warm, So there you go. Number 3, are there any people that have played a significant role in your Shakespeare journey? For this question, I thought I would just give a shout out to everyone who's participated in ShakeTube or ShakeTember. My co-hosts, of course, Jason and Kelly, well, they're not really my co-hosts anymore, but former co-hosts, because I don't host anymore, but Jason and Steve Donahue and Curtis from Curtis Books and Books, in case he's watching. Other people who've made videos on the subject, obviously Nicole from A Day of Small Things, who is now a host, who does great commentary on Shakespeare. I think I've just gotten a lot out of both the videos I've been able to watch from other booktubers on Shakespeare and from the commenters, people like Lillian Niesvender and Wilson Shugart, who comments a lot about Shakespeare. I've just gotten a lot out of the experience of ShakeTube and ShakeTember, and I don't think I would appreciate Shakespeare in the way that I do without the commentary from all these people. So it's no particular person, but just people who've been involved and participated in ShakeTube and ShakeTember. Number 4, do you have a favorite book or film about Shakespeare? Now, I couldn't help myself, so I decided to pick a book and a film. So for a book, I thought I'd give a shout out to Anthony Burgess's biography of Shakespeare. That's just called Shakespeare. And I haven't read any other biographies of Shakespeare. I want to, but the reason that I kind of like this biography is because really the amount that we know for sure about Shakespeare's life is not very, we don't know very much about him for certain that can be verified. And so Anthony Burgess kind of just takes that as a starting point and decides that instead of going the scholarly route of like figuring out what was most likely based on this, that, and the other source, what Shakespeare may have been doing at this time or other, he just kind of takes what information can be definitively verified about Shakespeare, takes it as a skeleton, and kind of fills in the blanks with his own fancies. I mean, he doesn't do anything outrageous, but he just dispenses with any pretense of scholarly acumen and will go on these flights of fancy where he just imagines what may have happened at a certain point in Shakespeare's life. And like there's a scene where he kind of fantasizes about what the first production of Hamlet would have been like, and so on. I really like that approach, and it's just so well written, and there's also some cool like dissection of Shakespeare's plays in it. Actually, because the hosts are reading Antony and Cleopatra, one of the best sort of dissections of Shakespeare's work that Anthony Burgess does is he takes a passage from Antony and Cleopatra in which one of the characters describes Cleopatra, and he compares it to the same passage, basically, from Plutarch, from the English translation of Plutarch that Shakespeare would have read, and breaks down just how similar they both are. And that's a really cool passage, and I thought I would give it a shout out because the hosts read Antony and Cleopatra for ShakeTember. So Shakespeare by Anthony Burgess, favorite book. And then for the film, I thought I would give a shout out to Shakespeare Behind Bars, which is a documentary that Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse showed me, basically. And this is a documentary that takes place in a prison. And it's about a production of The Tempest, I believe, that some of the inmates in this prison are putting on as a part of kind of an education program for people in prisons. And what I like about the documentary, in terms of how it relates to Shakespeare, what I like, there are a lot of other things I like about the documentary, but what I like in particular, how Shakespeare is dealt with in it, is you hear these inmates, many of whom have done horrible things, just talk about kind of what certain characters and exchanges and speeches from Shakespeare mean to them in the context of their own lives, right? And I like that because it's so very down to earth, and I think shows just how relevant Shakespeare is to anyone, right? There's a lot of discussions of Shakespeare talk about, you know, his greatness, his commentary on life, the universe, and everything, you know, these big bombastic statements about how great he is. And I don't necessarily disagree with these more highfalutin discussions of Shakespeare, but I like how in this documentary, it's all just very down-to-earth, real people talking about what specific characters and speeches from Shakespeare mean to them in the context of their lives that they've been living. So I thought I'd give a shout out to Shakespeare Behind Bars. Question 5. Which character in Shakespeare most resembles you, and in what ways? You know, this was a surprisingly easy question for me to answer. When I first read this question, I thought, oh my god, there are so many characters in Shakespeare, how am I going to decide? But an idea popped into my head for this question, and it ended up being a relatively easy answer for me. And probably if I thought more deeply about it, I could probably come up with a few other characters who I also see myself in. But the character that I landed on was actually Ariel from The Tempest. And the reason I kind of see myself in Ariel is because I think he's someone who, or he strikes me as someone, he doesn't have a ton of lines in play, but he strikes me as the kind of person who does his best to see the best in people. Like, he tries really hard to give people the benefit of the doubt and to try to assume that they have the best intentions. Obviously, we don't get enough from him in the play, I think, to necessarily know that for certain, but he strikes me as the kind of person who would be like that, and I'm very much like that. I do my hardest to see the best in people. I will bend over backwards to give people the benefit of the doubt, and will continue to hope that people mean well, even after they've maybe said and done some questionable things. And I've become a bit less like that as I've gotten older. Not that I'm that old, but as I've progressed through my 20s, I've become less like that. I've become less generous. But I still do try to see things from other people's perspective, assume the best in people. And I very much see that in Ariel, in particular because he seems to be the one who convinces Prospero to give up on revenge and kind of to embrace forgiveness. And so I thought I would go with Ariel for my answer to this particular question. Okay, number 6. Which play would you most like to see performed in a theater, and why? Well, this is one of, this question and the next question are the two questions where I kind of have to give a shout out to all the obvious answers. You know, I haven't seen very much Shakespeare on the stage, unfortunately, and that's mostly because in the time when I have become very obsessed with Shakespeare, I haven't really been close to very much good theater, and I can't usually really afford to go to the theater. And so I want to give a shout out to all of the, like, obvious answers. Like, obviously, I want to see Hamlet. Obviously, I want to see King Lear and Macbeth and A Midsummer Night's Dream and As You Like It, and The Tempest, naturally. But I think those are all kind of obvious, because those are all, like, pinnacles of Shakespeare, right? So the play that I thought I'd go with for my answer for this one is actually All's Well That Ends Well, which is, I think, so underappreciated as far as Shakespeare goes. I think among Shakespeare aficionados, it's a play that a lot of people love. But in terms of, like, how Shakespeare has penetrated the wider consciousness of the English-speaking world, I just feel like not many people know All's Well That Ends Well. You know, they know the title, of course, right? Like, everyone knows that saying. But there are a lot of people who don't even know that that's the title of a Shakespeare play. And it's so unfortunate because Helen, the heroine of the play, is one of Shakespeare's greatest creations, I think. She is just wonderful. And it's also one of the only Shakespeare plays that actually passes the Bechdel test. Shakespeare is known for having great heroines, but when you look at his plays, actually a lot of them do not pass the Bechdel test, which I'm not saying as a criticism, I'm just saying it's true. Even his plays that seem female-dominated, it's hard to find an interaction between two named female characters in which they talk about something other than a guy. So, All's Well That Ends Well, I would love to see that put on somewhere, and I would love the chance to see it. So, there's that. All right, number 7. What actor throughout history would you most like to have seen Hamlet while in his prime? Now, again, this is the second question where I have to just give a shout out to all of the obvious answers, right? Of course, I want to see Richard Burton. Duh. Of course, I would love to see, like, Marlon Brando never played Hamlet, but he did a lot of Shakespeare. I would love to see him play Hamlet, too. Or, like, Peter O'Toole, right? Alec Guinness. I mean, any great actor I would love to see. But again, I thought I would go with a bit more of an unconventional answer. And so I thought I would go with Liv Ullmann, the great Norwegian actress. Now, before people come for me in the comments for naming an actress rather than an actor, I will say that Hamlet is a very common breeches role. So it's actually been fairly common throughout history to have women play the role of Hamlet occasionally. Like Sarah Bernhardt became very well known for playing Hamlet. And I know there have been some recent productions that have cast women as Hamlet. So it's not that irregular to cast a woman as Hamlet. But I think Liv Ullmann would be an interesting choice because she can do so many interesting things with her face. There's this really cool scene in the film Cries and Whispers where the camera is just looking right at Liv Ullmann's face, and that's the only thing you can see. And off screen, there is a man talking about her character and sort of how she's changed throughout the years. And as that man sort of talks about her, you see these very subtle changes in her facial expression as he talks about different aspects of her and how she's changed. And I think that really subtle acting with the face would be a really cool technique to apply to someone like Hamlet, who has been referred to as a man made of words, right? Like, he has so many lines in this play, and it's already a long play. So to take an actor who is so good with just unspoken acting with the face and putting it on this role that is known for being so wordy would be kind of neat. And obviously that would be hard to do on the stage, right? Like, on the stage, it's hard to get a sense of someone's face. But I will say, the question, as it's worded, does not specify that you're talking about a stage production. So, you could make a film adaptation with Liv Ullmann, or could have. Probably wouldn't do it now because she's kind of getting on in years, but in her prime, could have made a film adaptation of Hamlet with Liv Ullmann in the role and done kind of cool things with close-ups on her face. So, that's what I thought I would go with as just an unconventional answer. Okay, number 8. Deliver your favorite speech or soliloquy from a Shakespeare play. Now, I'm not going to deliver it because I can't do dramatic readings for crap unless they're supposed to be humorous. So I'm just going to read my favorite soliloquy from a Shakespeare play. And this is from the final act of Macbeth. It's a very famous soliloquy. Probably a lot of you know it. Certainly, you'll recognize some book titles that have been taken from it, but it's the Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow soliloquy, which I had perfectly memorized for a while. I was not quite confident enough in myself to recite it verbatim off the top of my head for this video, so I do have it in front of me here, but I did have it memorized for a time. And the reason that I had it memorized was because I just kept going back and watching the clip of Ian McKellen doing this soliloquy, which, if I remember, I'll leave a link to just that scene, because he does it magnificently. But anyway, here is my favorite speech or soliloquy from Shakespeare. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So, suitably dark. People who know my personality will be able to tell immediately why that's my favorite soliloquy. But anyway, moving on. Number 9, do any of Shakespeare's plays intimidate you? If yes, what play and why? I wouldn't really say that any Shakespeare play intimidates me. I think what intimidates me about Shakespeare is being able to see him on the stage. Because again, I just haven't been near very many places where there's much stage for me to go see Shakespeare. So that kind of intimidates me. And what intimidates me about the stage, too, is the fact that when you go to see Shakespeare on the stage, you have no aids there with you, right? Like, when you watch a movie, you can put on subtitles, you can maybe read along with the play if you need it. If you're watching a recorded production, again, you can read along, you can put on subtitles. You can do a lot to kind of help you through a Shakespeare play when you just watch it in your own home, right? But when you're at the stage, it's just you and the theater, right? And so you need to keep up with everything, right? When you're seeing something on the stage. And that kind of intimidates me, because even though I've read all of Shakespeare and read some of his plays a few times, you know, I still foresee myself just completely losing track of what someone is talking about in a particular scene, even possibly in a play that I've read a few times. I could just completely lose track of what's going on. And so that intimidates me about Shakespeare. But no particular Shakespeare play really intimidates me. Number 10, what tips would you give to intimidated readers coming to Shakespeare for the first time? I would say make use of all those Shakespeare aids that are out there. No Fear Shakespeare, the Folger Shakespeare Library is great. Those editions, which come in really nice looking mass market paperbacks. Those, I think, are a great place to start for Shakespeare, not only because they have extensive notes that kind of let you know what words that maybe are archaic mean, but also have brief summaries of the action in each scene at the beginning of each scene. And I think in particular those summaries of the action really helped me, certainly, because I think what makes Shakespeare difficult is reading the language, figuring out what people mean, and keeping track of what's actually going on in a scene, right? But if you're reading a brief summary of the action before every scene, then you already sort of know what's going on. You know what's going to happen. And so that takes a bit of the pressure off of you as a reader to keep 100% track of what's going on, and allows you to just kind of sit with the language and hopefully absorb that language a bit better. So the Folger Shakespeare Library, No Fear Shakespeare. I also think reading a plot summary of the whole play beforehand. I know readers on the internet are obsessed with spoilers, but I think spoilers is an overrated concept. I think knowing something about the plot of the Shakespeare play before reading it will actually help you to get a lot more out of it. Because it's better to have the plot spoiled than it is to read the play and have the plot make no sense, right? So, fold your Shakespeare library, know for your Shakespeare, read summaries beforehand, and also start with a play that interests you. You know, I would definitely recommend starting with one of the more famous plays, because those are probably the ones that you've heard the most about. But start with one that particularly interests you. You know, don't force yourself to start with Hamlet if you don't want to start with Hamlet. I mean, Macbeth, I think, is good because it's short. Romeo and Juliet, certainly, because the story is so well known. But, you know, again, I think you have to kind of find your own inroad to Shakespeare, whatever that might be. So start with a Shakespeare play that really sounds like something you would dig, you know, based on the story as well. Okay, number 11. Which is your favorite Shakespeare play and why? Well, now, this is the question where I just allowed myself to go with the obvious answer. I'm not going to be, you know, I'm not going to be snooty like I was for the actor question and for the which I'd like to see performed question. I'm just going to go with the honest to God truth, which is Hamlet. Hamlet is my favorite. And I think it's just because it's a bottomless pit. It's open to so many interpretations. There are so many angles from which to look at it. And I think Hamlet himself is the closest that any writer has gotten, in English at least, to just putting a human consciousness into words to the extent that that's possible. And so I just find it to be a remarkable play for a lot of different reasons. And I hope at some point I get to see it on the stage with a proper good cast. So definitely Hamlet. And then number 12 is to tag other booktubers. I don't really feel in a place to tag people since I haven't even been making videos myself. I was going to tag Too Tight Lautrec. Shout out to Too Tight Lautrec, who does great videos on Shakespeare's sonnets, but she already did the tag. Well, she did it partly in the form of Joe O'Malley and partly in the form of Too Tight Lautrec, so he did it and she did it. So I was going to tag Too Tight Lautrec, but already done the video, so I don't really have anyone to tag, unfortunately. I would like to, but it just doesn't feel right. So, anyway. But thank you for tagging me, Jason, and thank you to Kelly and Nicole as well for just creating the tag and being great hosts of ShakeTember. It's been a great ShakeTember as far as I can see. So, anyway, I will sign off, and I'll talk to you all, well, I'm not sure when I'll talk to you all again, but it was nice dropping down for one video, making a little bit of a comeback, and who knows if I will ever return again, but we will see. Anyway, I will sign off now. Bye, everyone.